This is Reah, and this is Just the Who of Us, where we talk about a range of topics including life events, current events, spirituality, entertainment, family relationships, as well as answering listener questions and more.
Welcome back. And today with us, we have Taylor Locke again. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to have you to talk about this topic because it's something that you and I are pretty familiar with, and um, I loved our previous conversation. So I'm really glad to have you back. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me back. Happy to be here.
And so today we're going to talk about navigating difficult relationships during the holidays. So, those of you who are regulars know I typically have guests on around October through December to, discuss things like holiday grief. And I wanted to kind of shift focus a little bit and not focus as much on grief and focus a little bit more on relationships. Um, so Taylor is here today to help us give us some kind of pointers from their own experience on navigating these difficult relationships and share a little bit of personal experience and insight. And so let's get to it. So I know we briefly discussed in a previous episode how you've also had a little bit of experience with difficult relationships. And I think something that you mentioned in that previous conversation was, um, you know, not all relationships are perfect, obviously. We all know that. But, there's oftentimes when you have certain family members or a certain type of family that can be kind of biased or prejudiced against certain things. It's sometimes it's easy to not deal with those relationships, and sometimes it can be difficult because you love those people, you grew up with those people are close to you, and sometimes you can just kind of move away and live your own life, but other times you can't, or you don't want to. Sometimes it's just like, well, I want to have an enjoyable and successful holiday, but I've got people that are difficult to be around. So, um, so when I write for Brains, typically around this time of year, those of you who aren't familiar, Brains magazine is a magazine that we mutually write for, and typically around this time of year, when I talk about navigating difficult relationships, I say, look, if you don't want to go around people, you don't have to. I think it's super important because I think we kind of feel a sense of obligation in attending all of the things, especially if you have kids. You want your kids to experience all the things. And even if you don't, you want to experience all the things, right? But I think one thing that I really try to always hit home is that you don't have to overdo yourself. And I think it's really important because we can quickly become overwhelmed with, circumstances, with, uh, you know, over attending. I want to make sure I have to go to everything that I'm invited to, and that's absolutely not the case. One thing for me has been making sure that I plan things out as best as I can, uh, but also understand that if I need to cancel in the moment, I can cancel, and that's okay. And same for, if you have events that you put on, and if people need to cancel at last minute, we have to respect that too. So it's kind of that two-way street. And but their real point is you don't have to do everything. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for just the regular person, the holidays can be stressful because there's all of these things to prepare, gifts, people coming over, family dinners, everything. And even if you have, relatively like healthy relationships with your family, it can still just be a really stressful time.
Yeah.
But for those that might have more difficult family relations, it can be that much harder. And I think that's something that's also important for people to recognize that might not have the best relationships with their family is the trauma that can be associated around the holidays. Just because, maybe when you were a kid, there was like a Christmas where your parents had like a big fight because they were stressed, and then that like impacted you, or, your uncle got into an argument with someone because of politics over Thanksgiving, and so that ran Thanksgiving dinner last year, and so now you're like walking on eggshells the next year when you're getting together with your family. And so even if you might not realize it like at the time or even looking back, like there's still trauma that's associated with those memories.
Yes.
Uh, and even if you might not be aware of it or kind of like forgot about it, your body still remembers. And that goes both with like the holidays and just trauma in general, like around
Yeah.
the anniversary of those things, your body's going to be aware of that. So you're going to have higher stress and anxiety. And then when that also coincides with the holidays, that makes it just that much more difficult. So I really like this conversation because it's something that I've struggled with personally with some of my family trauma around the holidays. And it's something I tell people to just make sure that you are taking stock of yourself and aware of your own emotions and how you're doing. um don't kind of just be like, oh, it's the holidays, it's supposed to be like this. It's like, well, yes and no. And it's important for you to make sure that, if you need to step away from the dinner table or whatever to do what you need to do to make sure you're okay, that's really important.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you pointed that out too. It is as simple as just stepping away. Because, and this goes into such a deeper topic than just, okay, well, there's a lot going on, just the busyness. Um, Speaking on trauma, resolve trauma, unresolved trauma, because even through resolved trauma, you still have some kind of residual, you still have these experiences, and to keep that trauma resolved and keep on your healing path, you still want to make sure and take precautions that don't overwhelm you and don't kind of bring the effects of that trauma back. There are certain things that at 40, at doing cognitive behavioral therapy, that I didn't even realize that happened to me when I was literally an infant and a toddler, that still affected me deeply. And so sometimes, whether it be resolved or unresolved, we have, like you said, we have these experiences and these traumas that can kind of creep back up on us when things get really stressful. And I think it's wonderful that you point out things even as simple as just stepping away. And that's something that we know with, emotional regulation and having emotional intelligence. When things get overwhelming, just being able to say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to take a step back. And, political debates, religious debates, sports team rivalries, whatever the case may be. Sometimes we need a little, you know what? I had to do this with someone not too long ago, someone very close to me. I knew that what I was saying to them wasn't going to change their mind, and not that I really needed to change their mind, but like I could just tell like I was hitting a wall here, and I was just like, okay, like okay, you can have this one, because it doesn't really affect my life whether you agree with me or not. So just okay, and then I'm going to move on.
Yeah, taking the higher road is so important with that, and kind of adding on to what you're saying, because that's something a lot of people talk about with the holidays, particularly
Yeah.
with like Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, is the infamous, oh, is Grandpa gonna bring up politics type of thing. Um, and you know, I think working on strategies for de-escalation and trying to
Yeah.
change the conversation to something else is really important. Because a lot of times you'll have families with varying political and beliefs and religious beliefs, and
Hmm.
so those conversations tend to not go particularly well at the dinner table. So trying to steer the conversation away from something else, removing yourself from the conversation again if that's what's needed, and then doing whatever you can to de-escalate and to not engage with that. Because at the end of the day, if you still want to be there, they're your family, and
Yeah.
it's important to hold on to that part and not let those differences or whatever other challenges you may be facing, kind of ruin the holiday.
Yeah, and on the flip side, there it's okay to not attend things. And I say this because there was a point in my life where I put effort into forcing relationships. And, these are the relationships that were important to me. I didn't feel a ton of uh, give on, from the other side of the relationship, but I felt like, well, it's fine. If I want these relationships, then I just need to make them work. And also because I want my children to have like strong family relationships, and I would like to the point where it stressed me out all the time. And then finally I was just like, you know what? Whatever. Like, you know, if I mean, I can't carry a relationship and I can't carry multiple relationships. And I feel like, travel was a common excuse. And I'm just like, if I can travel an hour and a half to 2 hours for everything, some people can travel my way. You know what I mean? So I think and I only refer to with kids because I've had kids for 25 years. So, I think especially when there are kids or stepkids, in the mix, it makes us feel more also like we have to do these things and like we have to force these relationships and blah blah blah. And so I think that's important too. Like because I know certain people do. I was kind of raised like, no, this is family, and that means everything. And regardless of how the family treats you, you stay within stick to the family. And it wasn't really until I got older and my kids started getting a little bit older that they were kind of like, why do we have to go here? And I was like, you know what? We don't. Like, it's just, I had to kind of teach myself that just because I'm related to somebody doesn't mean that I have to be close and I have to be around them. I have an uncle who we share very, very different political views for various reasons. And, they're very like Blue Lives Matter and Trump hats and all the things that I'm very not. And he's very like straightforward in who he is. However, I can't say that we've ever gotten to like a political argument, you know, just because, they're very like out with their views and appearance. And they'll make little comments and things, but I we've never gotten into like an argument because most of us in the family, his own, my cousins and everything, just kind of like ignore it. And we just kind of like whatever, ignored it for a while. And then he like calmed down a little bit. And so that's kind of kind of another approach too. Like, there's some people who are just who they are for attention and love my uncle. He knows it. He does what he does for attention. And there are just people like that. And sometimes those people will push your buttons and literally you just ignore them. And then most of the time they'll shut up for a little bit. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about kind of life experience. So, you know, my experience with holidays has really up until this past year been I celebrate with my mom's family in North Carolina. I celebrate with my dad's family in South Carolina. So they live in two different states. Um, this past year was the first year that I didn't, as an adult, that I didn't spend time with both those families on Thanksgiving or Christmas. So typically every year, my family in South Carolina, we all get together. They typically do it on a different day than my North Carolina family, just out of habit, you know. Um, and so I'll typically will have Thanksgiving or Christmas, whatever, down here with my North Carolina family. My grandmother, my cousins, all their kids, my grandma's whole family, we all get together. And then my grandma passed last October. And the plan was to still get together, but there was a fight at her funeral um, between me and my cousin's husband. Technically, me and my husband and my cousin's husband for some inappropriate behavior because he is an alcoholic and he was inappropriate. So there was the fight at the funeral, and then next thing I know, my grandma's not only gone, but now we're not getting together for Thanksgiving. And now we're not getting together for Christmas. And it was such a different, and then South Carolina family things came up and we didn't get together for either. And so it was a pretty, I want to say it was pretty traumatic to me, you know, because like all my childhood traditions just gone. And, you know, we did things a little bit different. I did both holidays at my house and they both were great. Like it was so much fun. It was amazing. And I, held on to that and tried to be super grateful for that. But still in the back of my head, it was still painful, and this year, holidays are here again. And, although I know we kind of have these new traditions, and even if we go back to, uh, meeting as big families, it's still just it's so different, when you kind of lose that matriarch of the family and the matriarch of my father's family, she passed years ago, but we were able to still hold that tradition of everyone getting together. So, but it happens. It happens a lot when the kind of the head of family passes or when things just change. Maybe everybody's getting older. Everyone, there's no little kids anymore. Like nobody cares to get together to hunt Easter eggs or, whatever the case may be. Everybody's, like one of my kids doesn't live in the state anymore, so they're not able to come to everything. So it is one of those things. Life just happens and things just change, and we kind of just have to adapt, and sometimes that can be hard too. um, and for that, I just kind of want to say to give yourself time. Again, that's one of those things that where you don't have to show up to everything. If you need time to heal and to grieve because things have changed or, something traumatic happened, take that time. What is your advice on that kind of, the situations where things change or difficult things happen and we're having to navigate the big changes?
Yeah, I mean, oh, there's so many different directions I can go. Um, Life is change.
Yeah.
Life is just we're constantly going through change. Uh, and obviously the same is true within our families. Eventually, unfortunately, people grow old and pass away. Family relationships change over time as people grow up from like kids to adults.
Yeah.
Um, the dynamics change and everything. And then, also just other things that are completely outside of the family that happen that still like affect the way that
Yeah.
we get together. Like,
That's true.
COVID that
Yes.
affected everyone. So there's just so much change, and it can be. it can be so hard, to accept that and to go through it.
Mhm.
But it is important to acknowledge that and try to process it as best you can. Um, I've also had to, experience a lot of change, particularly around the holidays. Um, my sophomore year of college, was when I was kicked out by my biological family, during Christmas, and
Oh
haven't
gosh.
really had a relationship with them since then. So both losing my family and also having a lot of trauma around the holidays.
Yeah.
Um, and since then, my best friend, his family's kind of like adopted me. Like I literally like changed my last name to take on theirs. So I'm like, even though I'm an adult, I'm like part of their family now. But
Yeah.
that was at 19, that was such a huge life altering series of events for me.
Yeah.
With losing the family I grew up with and building a new one. Um, and with that, I also want to go back to what you had mentioned earlier, with like difficult relationships and that you might not have relationships with specific family members. Because I know the
Yeah.
holidays can also be really hard for people who, don't have families for whatever circumstances that may be.
Right.
Um, and the importance of found family, I think, is so important and cannot be understated. When I had said, uh at the end of the day, your family, I had prefaced that as if you want to be there, because
Yeah.
that's such an important piece to that, where it's like, do these people make you feel like you belong and that you feel like you're part of that family? Because if not, and you don't want to be there, there's nothing that's forcing you to.
Yeah.
um, and something I hear a lot, of people talking about, like the importance of, biological families. They'll say, the blood is thicker than water. That's not the quote. The quote
Yeah.
is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It's the relationships that you choose to build with people that is more important than who you were born as or with.
Yes.
So I think, again, for those who have unconventional families or don't have families at all or good relationships with their families, particularly around the holidays, it's so important to who are the people in your life that you choose to be with and that support you, and to be with those people. So I just wanted to say that, in addition to the whole like accepting change and kind of just moving forward with that.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And it's one reason that I like having these conversations with you because you provide kind of a different perspective. Like I said, my perspective is mostly from like being a parent and even as like a college age person, I already had kids. So I really appreciate having your perspective. And plus, I still have my biological family. And so it's really great to have this perspective of someone who has gone through what you've gone through because I haven't experienced it. So I wouldn't think to know these things or to look from that perspective. So I really appreciate that. And it's just one of the reasons that I love having you here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I also, with this conversation, wanted to touch on being in families of like differing cultures or like perspectives. So
Yeah.
for me, when I was growing up with my biological family, my dad's side of the family was all Christian and my mom's side of the family was all Jewish. So I
Oh.
grew up in a multi-religious household. So we would, like be lighting the menorah under the Christmas tree and things like that. Um, and so to me, that was just kind of like having both of those perspectives. But as I grew older and my parents were fighting more, religion came became one of the things that they were fighting about, because even
Ah,
though that they had agreed that they'd be raising both of their kids in both Judaism and Christian, uh, my dad was no longer okay with that, and he wanted his kids to only be Christian. And so I remember there was a big fight when I was with my mom and her side of the family, celebrating Rosh Hashanah, and we were saying like a Hebrew prayer, and my dad just went ballistic, which was unfortunate. Didn't really celebrate many of the Jewish holidays after that.
oh,
Um, and, kind of looking back on all of that now, I know that there are so many different types of like families that have that different cultures that are mixed together. And sometimes that's fine. Like it was for me when I was younger, where that was just a part of my perspective, but other times those cultures can clash. Not, I think I phrased that wrong. Not that the cultures themselves clash, but that the people in the families have differing beliefs and aren't as accepting as they should be of the other culture.
yeah,
Um, and particularly for for kids that are experiencing that, that can be like really confusing and upsetting,
yeah,
especially with, the culture and the family that you grow up in being such a huge part of your identity. Um,
yes.
so there was a lot of identity, I guess, trauma for me to have to go through in addition to everything else. Um, but looking back on that, I think it's also really important when we're talking about families and the holidays to um, be mindful of different cultures and different beliefs, and really respectful of that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's I remember just random comments about like, well, they're like nothing's open on Christmas. The only thing that's open is like Chinese restaurants and blah, just like different people through the years just making these observations. And everything closes early and whatever. And that mostly is because, well, it's a nationally observed holiday, right? So a lot of things close on these particular holidays. But also for, oh, well, like, oh, there are certain things open. That's weird that they're open, blah, blah, blah. Not everybody celebrates these holidays the same way, and that's okay too. Everything that I've done growing up around like Thanksgiving, Christmas in particular, was around Christianity, right? And so, but now as an adult, I don't necessarily celebrate the same way. To me, for me and my family, it's more about like the celebratory aspects of the season and family and things like that, and just doing all the fun, doing the fun little the things, but more so like we're spending a lot of time together where I know people who go to like New Year's, like people who go to church New Year's Eve night. I've never done that. It's just never been a tradition that my family had. But kudos to you. Like, I think that's great, to start your new year out that way. And if you don't, then that's fine too. I think part of the issue a lot of times is, like you said, like not respecting other cultures' differences. And, of course, growing up around Christianity, I also hear a lot too about, you know, issues of people saying like happy holidays or, just like wording people use. And I'm like, who cares? This person might not celebrate Christmas. Maybe they weren't raised to. Maybe they were, and they just don't. Like, who cares? It's one of the things that's like you celebrate these holidays, what makes sense to you. And if you don't want to celebrate them for whatever reason, you don't have to. Like, I have friends, I have my kids have friends, them and their parents, they don't necessarily celebrate Christmas or, whatever. Like, Thanksgiving to them is just getting together with family. And they may go around and say what they're thankful for, but that's It's about family time, and that's fine. So I think it's a really important statement to make, to like, if you are someone who does celebrate, to not judge someone who doesn't. Or if you don't celebrate, that's okay. Like, whatever makes you and your family and your household happy and healthy, and you know, that's what matters, and that's what you should do. And I don't think a lot of people think like, actually, that's not true. I think a lot of people now more so do think like that, but I don't think historically that's been kind of the mindset. And I'm glad to see more people feel that way. You don't have to say, you can say happy holidays. Tell me happy holidays for all of them. I don't care. Or if it's, oh, what are you doing for Christmas? Oh, nothing. I'm sitting at home watching a movie, whatever. That sounds great. Like, you don't have to do what anyone tells you that you have to do. And if you don't, and if you are someone who celebrates the holidays for religious reasons, please don't judge people who don't.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, no, happy holidays, Hanukkah, Merry Christmas. Like, it doesn't matter what you individually celebrate when someone else is saying that to you. It's the sentiment behind it.
Or that too.
Um,
Yes. Be grateful that someone's wishing you well, or, like a happy something.
yeah, and that's also the whole point of the holidays is it's being nice to each other,
Right.
wishing, wellness to others.
Right.
This is kind of a small thing, but you made me think of it when you were talking about like what stores are open or not around the holidays. Because I know that people will like be really upset like when something's closed on Christmas, and then be like, oh, how can they be closed? Because I need to get this thing last minute. It's like, oh, well, because all of the other people who work there are also spending time, at home with their
Exactly.
families. And I think
Exactly.
with the stress of the holidays, a lot of people forget that. Particularly like, Christmas shopping and Black Friday sales and stuff. And it's like
Yeah.
it's understandable to be stressed, but make sure that you're still being courteous to other people,
Yes.
especially the people that are working there.
Yes.
People in sales jobs, as someone who's worked in sales, have a hard time during the rest of the year. Um, don't be the person who's causing their life to be that much worse around the holidays.
Absolutely. I've worked a Black Friday at Walmart before. Okay, midnight, let me tell you. Like, because it used to be that sales started at midnight and you were waiting in a line and you had to like watch these lines so that people didn't get crazy and skip like their toddlers and whatever else. So yes, like, give people a break and be courteous, because they have families to spend time with too, or they just want to be at home relaxing, not dealing with your forgetfulness. All right. Well, we've got about 6 minutes left. So I feel like we covered everything pretty much. We talked about, the different perspectives, different the way, people celebrate differently, kind of navigating those difficult relationships. Is there anything else that we may have left out, or that you just thought of that you want to throw in?
Um, I guess just as kind of like a last final thing, kind of just tying everything together is, the holidays can be a lot of different things for different people. Um, like you were saying earlier, that like, some people might be celebrating very religiously, others not, particularly the US, where like Christmas is both a Christian holiday, but also very heavily commercialized
Yes.
as a US holiday. So it's celebrated, so differently than like for me, I celebrated Christmas and Hanukkah at the same time because I come from like a mixed cultural family in that sense. And so it's just, I think just being mindful of the fact that, everyone comes from different background, has different perspectives. They're going to celebrate holidays differently. Holidays are going to mean different things to them. For some, it will be excitement as they're getting together with the families. Other, it could be really traumatic memories of, um, either not having a family or bad memories with their family. But no matter what, I think just being mindful of that and then just being nice to each other, that's
Yeah.
that's really, I think, the core thing with both Thanksgiving and Christmas and the time between those is that, and especially now with all of the hateful rhetoric that's been going around, and politics and things like that, it's just really important for us to be nice to other people.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing, I mentioned you don't have to do all the things, right? But on the flip side, if you are someone who is experiencing like specifically grief around the holidays, or just a lot of stress and tension and trauma, sometimes it is good to go out and do things. On that flip side, if you are kind of, experiencing some depression maybe around the holidays or grief, sometimes it is good to get up and get dressed and go do something celebratory and kind of get yourself in this positive, happy, festive spirit. It can be really good for the soul, even if it's just going to, I want to say a bar, but like I don't really drink, but even if you don't drink, a lot of bars have like festive little things going on around the holidays, or your local park. I know like here they are always throwing some kind of celebration at our park downtown. So whether it's by yourself, whether it's with friends, it's also a really good time to kind of get yourself out of the house and get yourself around some festivities and kind of bring that more out and that feeling, that happy celebratory feeling up a little bit. It can be good for the soul if you're going through things you also want to take your mind off of. All right. Well, I think that is about it for today. I really, really appreciate you being here again. And I look forward to having you um, many, many times over. And they'll be seeing you a couple more times at least, and hopefully more. So thank you for being here today, and see you next time.
Thank you for having me again. Thank you.
You're welcome. Check us out on YouTube at Reah Higgs, ReahHagues. You can also keep up with us on Instagram at Just the Who Podcast.